I'm here with Radhika Morabia, software engineer at Eltron. Previously a successful marketer and copywriter, Radhika has, without formal education, made the transition to software engineer. Welcome, Radhika.
Hi, happy to be here.
I'd like to explore a little bit your journey to software engineer, how you got started with tech, how you've picked up the skills that landed you that first engineering job. But before we get there, can we go back to that marketing business? That sounded successful. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the role that tech played in it?
Yeah, so I started out by individually blogging about self-help, which is a very weird topic in a very weird world. But along the way, I had to build my blog both from a tech perspective and from a writing perspective. And from there, I got both offers into tech and marketing. And I chose marketing. And I mean, the rest is kind of history. I enjoyed it while I did it, but I'm happy to be out of it.
Yeah, so the marketing bug didn't last. But what was the tech stack you chose? You mentioned blogging. What was the platform you used?
So I started with WordPress, like just about everybody does. But then eventually I found it limiting because I wanted to move into being able to have a blog that was sort of like a database. And so eventually I started learning GitHub and Jekyll and even just raw HTML and CSS so I could build my site in the way that I wanted to.
Oh, awesome. So the tech was sort of playing a supporting role to your marketing business, but gradually it became a limiting factor, and you started to poke at some of the sort of newer blogging platforms like Jekyll. How did that go? Did you enjoy it? And clearly you've stuck with tech.
Oh gosh, the first time I remember I was on Windows, which is terrible with Ruby. So Jekyll runs on Ruby, and it was a nightmare to get set up. But once I finally did, I felt like I don't know, like I had actually accomplished something. Like I had actually built something. I'd never really been that much of like a Legos kid growing up, but this was like felt like the first time I had actually built something from scratch on my own, even though I used all these pre-made tools like Jekyll and CSS frameworks, but it still felt like it was my baby and I could control 100% of it.
And that might be where your tech bug started. There is something, isn't there, to putting together the blocks. Even if you don't feel like you've built everything, you start to put those blocks together, and it's magical what you can actually achieve. But why did marketing not stick? Did the tech become too exciting? You were spending more and more time on the tech, or was it marketing started to fade a little bit? What led you out of the marketing business?
So specifically, I was a freelance marketer, and I guess what I fell out of love with was freelancing. So everyone tells you that the hardest part of freelancing is getting clients, and after that, it's just smooth sailing. And I had that down pat. I was making money, I had recurring clients. It was great. But the problem is with freelancing, even if I was to do tech freelancing now, the problem is once you get good and known at something, everyone wants you for that exact same thing again and again and again. So I knew that I needed to get a job. Even though I swore to myself I'd never get a job, I knew that what I actually wanted was a job. And I guess I decided, like, if I was going to do marketing job, I'd have to start from zero again. But I had already been in control of such big projects with such big scopes. So I decided that, like, I needed to learn something new, and I had already had at least some experience with tech. I knew a few web developers, and I guess I just went for it.
It's interesting hearing you describe that. The kind of monotony that, although the clients themselves are different, the kind of challenges, the problems they face are the same, and it kind of led to a monotony in the work. And it's somewhat refreshing to hear you say that may also be the case with a freelance tech job, because I have definitely experienced that monotony occasionally over my own career. So interesting to hear you say that. So with that kind of decision to start with tech, you clearly had a little bit of a background in it, and a background out of, I'm going to say, necessity. You're hosting a blog sounds simple. I mean, many people use hosted WordPress, but you talked on one of your articles, you've talked around hosting, you've talked around DNS, you've talked around open source. You've talked around the licensing. You've started to cover some of the real difficult challenges that people face in tech. So with all of that experience behind you, where did you go when you decided you wanted to do this a little bit more formally, as it were?
I don't know if that background helped me very much. It helped me figure out that I wanted to be a web developer, and it helped me at least learn more about that job market, because I've met people who didn't even think that like hobbyist people who work on their own websites, who wouldn't think that being a web developer is a real job that people can do up until, recently when it exploded. But, a lot of other people grew up just making websites and they weren't able to even consider it as a career. And I guess I'd always sort of considered it as a career. Like when I was 10, I swore I'd grow up and work for Google. And that dream, my dream is to reject Google at some point. But anyway, that's a different topic. And so I always knew that web development was an option. And I always knew like vaguely what was involved. It was just, every few years when I'd decide like, hey, I want to become a programmer, the technologies would change. So I went to where a lot of people go to now, which is Free Code Camp, which covers specifically a JavaScript-based full stack education. And I didn't like it very much, but I liked having it all be JavaScript instead of, JavaScript and Ruby or JavaScript and Python. I knew from Free Code Camp that I wanted to learn all JavaScript, and I guess I did it.
You've definitely succeeded. But can you? Free Code Camp is popular. It's really hard to avoid a mention or a recommendation for it in any of the sort of get started in tech discussion forums. Are you able to sort of elaborate a little bit more on what it was that didn't gel for you? What did you not like about the format?
So I remember back in 2014 when I was doing my websites and stuff. I went to Code Academy, which was very, very hip at the time, to learn JavaScript and a bit of Python. And I remember, so Code Academy is based on learn by exercises. And I remember I went through the like intro course, which was like an hour. And then after that, I never wanted to do it again, just because it was so excruciatingly boring. So I guess that's why I wasn't a programmer earlier. And I found that Free Code Camp was really similar. I mean, the entire thing is like learn by exercises. But the problem with learning by exercises for me was that the way that they're made, it's not like learn by building this thing yourself in your own environment on your own computer the way you would as a professional developer. It was, we've pre-written some of this code for you. Now all you have to do is fill in the blanks. Like it felt like school. Like I don't know if they do CS classes now in school, but if I was to imagine that, if there was a JavaScript class in high school, that's how it would be, where all you have to do is memorize what goes in the blanks.
Yeah, almost like a paint by numbers style course to art, as it were. It's interesting. I think you touch in one of your articles on the fear of the blank editor, and that's one of those things that I think is very common with those who have had that sort of style of or been through that sort of style of course where much of the boilerplate is filled in for you. The executable environment is there, and you fill in a function or you provide the values to a variable, as it were. And things work. You light up the screen, you change the color, you write the menus, but you never actually get that sense as to how the whole comes together. Is that really what it was that was putting you off? You felt like you weren't seeing the full picture?
Yeah, and I think just coming from that education background where I didn't really have a formal education, I think I always knew that wasn't the way that at least I learn best. I don't think most people learn best that way. I'm sure Free Code Camp has worked for some people, but like I'd imagine many more people have quit the platform than have succeeded all the way. It just doesn't seem like it's applicable, but it's not applicable enough. It's that middle ground between hand holding completely and then just being left out on your own. And I always knew I wanted to just go in the deep end, just throw me in completely, and of course give me a little help, like in the forms of tutorials and courses and whatever, but I always wanted to be making something myself because I think that's the only way that I learn.
You've got a proven track record of that. So you'd made your own blog, you'd made your own site, you'd started building that database, you'd got your marketing business up and running. So you clearly have a track record of being able to jump in at that deep end without that sort of hand holding that comes with that formal education. But having rejected Free Code Camp, where next? Was it another course? Was it a different forum, a different style? Where did you go for tech and learning?
So I always knew that I liked the Free Code Camp, at least their broad overview of what to learn, like first HTML and CSS, a bit of Bootstrap, and then vanilla JavaScript first, and then React, which is a very popular front-end framework, and then Node, which is back-end JavaScript. I liked that progression, and I liked the projects that they had at the end of their sections. But I just didn't like the lessons. So what I tried to do was just fill in alternatives for those lessons. I tried first with reading books. It didn't really work out for me. It was difficult for me to keep focus on the books, and I understand that, people have different, like, people could think the opposite of me here, because I found videos to be better, but specifically, I only liked a very specific kind of video, and this is the kind of video that I think most people hate, but, like, it worked for me, where I learned by, I specifically went out and I tried to find video courses where you code along with the teacher, just, like, there's no shortcuts, there's no, like, crazy like Emmet stuff where you fill it in with a boilerplate. You start from scratch with the teacher and together you build something. And they're very slow, but I love them. Specifically to learn vanilla JavaScript, I did Watch and Code, which is everyone recommends. It's called Practical JavaScript. It's Googleable. And then also Udemy, the way the platform works very well with that style of teaching, where they kind of advertise like this course is this many hours, and so it's more of a value add to go slower. So there's a lot of coding along in Udemy courses, and so it was pretty much watch and code and then straight to Udemy. There's a few books on the side here and there, but mostly learning through a mix of Udemy / watch and code projects, and then a few written tutorials here and there for very specific topics.
So I didn't know you could do that. Was to take it sounds like you took the curriculum from Free Code Camp, and you avoided using their sort of learning framework, the site that comes with it, and filled in the gaps by finding alternative tutorials and courses and material that worked for you. Where would someone go to get that curriculum? Do they make the curriculum available for anyone just to go and pull apart? It sounds amazing.
Yeah, so they have this thing called the learning map, and they have specific lesson titles, which is a good way to figure out, like, to have a checklist of, oh, should I learn this? Should I learn this? So that worked out moderately well. There's also one other resource that I just remembered right now. I don't remember the name, but I think it's called like the JavaScript Blueprint or something by Zell Liu. It's like a 5-day free email course that goes over what to learn in order, which is also just really good for, again, just figuring out a curriculum. Like, once I knew what I needed to learn, it was only a matter of time until I figured out like which resources fit that specific requirement. And I know some people don't have a huge outline already ready to go, but I was always changing my outline every single month, and I always had a plan. Here's what I'm learning next. Here's what I've already learned. Here's what I'm going to learn 3 months from now. Here's what I'm going to learn tomorrow. It was always really planned out.
It's almost like a personalized education in tech that you've built for yourself there. Figure out the plan and then go and get the resources that help you to to tackle the particular topics in the plan that you're focusing on at the moment. That's fairly, I've not heard of this being done by anyone else. I think it's far more common just to follow a course from start to finish and see where you get, and then pick up a different course.
See, I think the problem with that is that when you follow a course from start to finish, even the courses that I took, they never have a point where they ask you, hey, stop, code something on your own, make something from scratch, and then come back. That's the problem, I think, with going through a course and trusting it blindly. There always has to be stopping points, there always has to be supplemental resources, and there always has to be supplemental projects, which is why I think I didn't end up taking that many courses, because the courses were more like introductions to what's possible. And then what's really possible, I only learned while I was building my projects.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mention that, because at some point in your learning, you stopped and you wrote an article, how to go from knowing the basics of JavaScript to actually building websites. So it sounds like you had that as you were going through your own learning curriculum. You stopped and you realized you'd hit a point where you needed to try building your own projects. What prompted that? How did you know you were ready to let go of the free CodeCamp curriculum, let go of their projects, and tackle something yourself? And can you tell us a little bit about what you tackled first?
So I think I always knew that the end goal of these tutorials is to make something myself. So first I was just kind of like not doing well with a bunch of courses, and then I ended up with Watching Code, where together you build a to-do list. You started out in like the command line doing very, very basic things, and in the end you have a full-scale application that taught me like the basics of JavaScript. And when I came out of that, I thought, hey, let's build my own to-do list. And it didn't go well, obviously. It was very overwhelming. I mean, it's a 100-line app that you build together in that course, and 100 lines doesn't seem like a lot today, but I mean, if I was at that point again where I was learning from nothing, 100 lines is a huge app at that point. And I remember I was talking to a friend in CodeBuddies about this, and she said, just build a forgot what it's called, like a slideshow, like one of those little like jQuery plugins, except do it in vanilla JavaScript. And I was like, I can do that. I can build just a tiny component of a website and not a full website. And she was like, yeah, why not? And I took it even further, and I was like, what is the smallest app I can think of, just so I can say I put something out there? And that was hello name, where a user inputs their names, clicks submit, because I didn't know how to do and like the end keyboard enter and click. So I only had it on click because that's how new I was. And then below it would say hello and then that user's input. And that is literally a 5-line piece of like app, but it took me forever. It took me like 3 hours, and I was so proud of it at the end. And like just getting past that point, like I built something myself. Now I can build anything myself. And I mean, I still tried to start relatively small, but it grew from there. Like first you have to start with that 5 lines, then 15 lines, then 50 lines, then 100 lines. And I mean, I don't think I'm very past the 100, 200, 300 line point at this point, but it'll continue growing until I make the biggest app ever.
It's really encouraging to hear you say that, because it may seem like, to anyone that's written code in the past, it may seem like one of the most simple things you can build. It's possibly a simple step up from Hello World, where there is no name, it's just world. But it's your app. Like you had to make that from scratch. You had to figure out what files were needed. There was no boilerplates. There was no follow the steps, and you took it from start to finish. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about the success of that, because time and time again, if you look at some of the challenges faced with anyone following a tutorial, it's very often that the challenge, the sticking point, is not in the tutorial itself. It's in the setup or the environment or the IDE or anything that went on around it, because no one's ever taken through that. And your journey to writing that simple hello name has set you up to tackle all of those bits that go on around that, and you've built on it from there. So I'm really pleased and really encouraged to hear how you've got to that point. I think it's something that we should encourage others to try and explore, is making their own apps, no matter how simple, no matter if someone's done them before.
That's the whole reason that I wrote that article, because I just wasn't seeing it enough out there. And I remember I posted it to Reddit first, just because I thought that was just R-Learn programming, because I thought that was a good community to put that out there. And I remember the first comment I got was basically saying, oh, this is too simple. And I remember I was like, this is not for you if it's too simple. There's people out there. I know there's people out there, because I've met those people on CodeBuddies and other Slacks that aren't even at that point, that cannot struggle past that I need to make a tiny app. But they don't realize that tiny isn't, I specifically always called it tiny projects because they're very tiny. And small to me is a to-do list. Tiny is the hello name. So just making it as not intimidating as possible.
It's such a valuable skill to have. I mean, there is nothing wrong with a tiny, simple project. I'm sure you found as you've gone on and increased the complexity that some of this, a complex solution to a problem is never really where you want to be. The simpler you can make it, the better. And I love how in the article and in your GitHub history, you can see how what started off as hello name has developed into everything, to the colors game. You've built complete, fully functioning web apps, and it's not hard to see how that is gradually morphed into an employable skill set. So moving on from the kind of learning stage, you're building these apps. At some point, you started to think about work, a job. You've mentioned tech was the goal. You knew you wanted a job, but how did you move from learning to actively seeking a job to landing interviews? What was the trigger for that?
I was always kind of anxious about this because I not only don't have a CS degree, I don't have any sort of degree. And that's fine when you're freelancing because no one on the internet knows you're a dog. But in the job world, my resume just isn't that great. And I hated that because I knew that if someone sat down and talked to me, then I could easily impress them with my self-learning, but you cannot get that across in a resume. And so I got lucky. Through networking, I landed an interview for a web developer internship in New York City. And I didn't feel like I was ready, but the person who recommended me the job said you'd be perfect for it. And so I told myself I'd be perfect for it, and I went for it.
It's always nice when you get that little nudge of encouragement, isn't it? But before we get into the interviews itself and where that led, can I come back to the lack of the education and the barriers you saw that putting up in front of you? Did you find that where were the barriers coming from? Was it an internal fear that people would reject you? Was it people weren't even looking at the resume? They were just seeing a blank education. It wasn't ticking a box, and you weren't getting those interviews. How did you kind of deal with that challenge of not having that box that was ticked that so many people ask for?
I think most of this fear came from reading a lot of Reddit and reading a lot of Medium. There's a subreddit in particular, RCS career questions, where everyone on there is like the most perfect student you've ever seen. Like, there's people on there lamenting, I didn't get $100,000 Amazon internship my freshman year. Am I doomed forever? So you would see a lot of people in there who claim to be, oh, I've been looking for a job for 2 years. Nobody's hiring juniors. No. Even with a degree, it's hard, etc., etc. And of course, it's hard, but reading that every single day really, really got in my head. And same thing with Medium. where there's a lot of like angry articles on Medium about how the tech industry is imploding in on itself, and I would never recommend any young people join, like we're all worked like dogs, and all of this nonsense that I knew wasn't true for everyone. Because I mean, like, if you ask an average person who isn't a developer, everyone believes that software engineering is one of the best jobs in the world, and I agree with that. That's why I wanted to be in it. Um, but that negativity really got to me, and I had to like specifically put out like in my to-do list app, I would specifically say, "Do not check Reddit." And then if I succeeded that, I would get a +1. Like that's how much it was affecting me.
It's really encouraging, because I think you're absolutely spot on. If you look at what the material that's out there on the internet, it's really easy to be discouraged on so many levels. I mean, you talk about the education angle, the kind of the need for the internship, but even if you come back to the method of learning, this is what's so interesting to hear your story. Is there is always a right way to learn. You must learn front end before back end. You must learn this particular framework and not that one. You must do this style of project or you're not. You must use this tool or you're not. There is so much opinion and there is only so much this mindset that there is only the right way to do something, that unless you do step back and take that broader view or take a different path as you've done, you miss out on the fact that so much of that is untrue. And this is why I find your story and your learning path to even just being able to build these apps long before you even get the job is so fascinating. So coming back to that interview, you were nudged by a friend who gave you some confidence to go and have the interview. How did it go?
It went okay. I always walked in with confidence. I think that's the only way to even get past an interview, is to believe you already have the job. Even though like in my heart and soul, I didn't think I was qualified. I pretended I was, because I think if you have nothing to lose, then you're just gonna be better. So I was trying to be as confident as possible, and I think I was. I think I got to the final interview, and I'd already talked to like 5 or 6 people, and it was going moderately well. Definitely the engineers I talked to really liked me. I had a take home exercise, and they were impressed with that. And I told them about my self teaching, and in particular, what stood out kind of was on my old website, which isn't up anymore, but if you dig through my GitHub commits, you can find it. I hosted a daily blog where I wrote about every single thing I learned that day, and I also had like monthly updates. And so I had very demonstrable experience that most juniors and newbies don't really put out there. Like, have a web presence from day one means that they could see my development over time. Even if you just glanced through my monthly post, you could see me going from what is I'm trying to think, I even forgot the word, the box thing for CSS, I forgot. But anyway, the point is I was learning CSS again, to going all the way from that to trying to learn a bit of backend JavaScript. And you could see every day what I did, how long I spent learning, what I put out there, my feelings on it, my thoughts on it. It was all out there. It's thousands and thousands of words. And they were pretty impressed with that, which was my goal. But in the end, what happened was I got second place to someone who knew the back end way better than me, which, I mean, it's a pretty valid point. I'm now glad I didn't get the job. That person is probably more qualified than me, but getting second place as someone who was only learning for 4 months at that point was amazing.
A bit of a mixed blessing then. You didn't get the job, but you look back on it and you realize that perhaps that was a good thing. Overall, it sounds like a positive experience. Before we sort of move on and sort of tackle what came next, that lack of an education, this was your first interview since taking tech seriously as a career option. Did it come up? Was that validation that it no longer mattered? Did that help at all? How did that go down?
It helped for sure, but in a mixed way. Where I knew I only got the interview because of networking, and I when I lost that job, I wondered, oh my God, when am I ever going to get an opportunity like this again? Because I always knew, and now that I've actually applied to jobs, I know for a fact that I've never really gotten a call back on a resume push. I've only gotten jobs through networking or like internal forums, like local Slacks or even just bigger Slacks. In particular, I got this job through a local girl development group. That's like the only way that I've been able to get any calls back. So I knew I could get a job through networking, but networking is hard.
But it sounds like it would be on your list of things to recommend to anyone in a similar position to yourself, is to go out there and network and to put yourself out there and meet people. Would that be correct?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. People make it out to be a lot harder than it actually is. Like for me with this job, in the local girl development group. So this was just on Slack. They just have a careers channel and where they post if there's a job opportunity, they will post about it. And what people don't realize with networking in these groups is that there are specific companies who know these groups and want to hire through these groups. So the job that I was hired for now was never posted anywhere publicly. It was only posted on that Slack. And of course, if they hadn't found me, they might have posted it publicly. But they found me because they wanted someone through the local girl development group. And I came through and they hired me. And there's always much less competition in those things. I didn't even know anyone really in that Slack. I just kind of lurked around and I said hello. But I just kept an eye on that careers channel and that looked kind of relevant to me, so I applied.
And congratulations. It sounds like that networking and that very sort of public learning path and that demonstrable learning really did pay off.
Oh yeah, for sure.
How was day one?
It was interesting. I work at a very interesting company where everyone's very warm and very like friendly. And I wasn't really thrown into work that deeply. There was a lot of meeting people and there was a lot of friendliness. I was very overwhelmed. Just coming from a freelance background, I was like, I am on the clock and you are saying hello to me. I'm getting paid to say hello to people. Like it was very weird to me. But it's a very warm environment and I'm glad to be there.
That's really refreshing to hear. I mean, so often a first day experience is terrible. But it must have been strange going from self-initiated projects to being there on day one, week one, and having paid projects to work on. How have you found working in tech since you've been there?
See, here's what's interesting about this job, and in particular, coming from an unconventional background. So, I was the first person who called about the job. And from day one, or even from call one, I guess, I had this very strong, I don't know what the word is, but I gave off this sense that I was very autonomous and independent, which is true, which is a big part of my background. And that is the main reason that they hired me, actually. Like, I didn't know most of the technologies that were on the job application. But I was interviewing with the developer, my senior, and his manager, who was non-technical, the COO of the company, and specifically they liked my personality, they liked the autonomy of me, and that's why they hired me. So it's very interesting at this job because they hired me for that, they also sort of let me do whatever I want. So for week one of the job, I had to learn Vue, which is another JavaScript framework. I had learned React while learning because I heard that was the most marketable skill. But at this job, they were using Vue. So week one, I bought a Udemy course and I was learning just like I would have at home and building projects with the course. to get up to speed with that. So it felt a lot like what I was already doing. I mean, it also didn't feel like what I was already doing, but they hired me because of the way that I taught myself and because of the way that I used to have a business background. All of that fed into my hiring. And also, my senior is also actually a college dropout. So basically, I just was the perfect personality fit.
It's an awesome outcome, isn't it? It's really interesting to hear. I think we're coming up to time, but I think it for me it is really interesting to hear how there isn't one path through to a job. And actually, as you've gone through this story of your own learning path of taking that free code camp curriculum, realizing the potential and the goodness in it, but realizing also it wouldn't work for you, making it your own, driving your own learning path, you now find yourself being hired for not knowing a particular framework or not knowing a particular technology. You're being hired because of the journey that you've taken. You're being hired because of the background and the approach that you've taken to this. And I think that's possibly one of the most, I hope, sort of the best validation that you've got so far in the approach that you've taken is actually the correct one for you. Is that what it feels like, or you feel you've still got a lot further to go?
I definitely feel like that. This job is perfect for me. You know, my senior and I basically are connected at the head, even though we basically just met. We complement each other perfectly. The company's really warm. Like they made the right choice, at least personality wise. I can't speak for my technical skills, but personality wise, they made the right choice, and I made the right choice. And if I had sacrificed, you know, myself, my personality, like if I had gone back to school even though I knew I didn't want to, then I would have lost that unique edge that really made me stand out here, that got me into the kind of job that I always wanted.
Congratulations. It sounds like it's been hard work, but it's paid off. So before we go, I'd like to give you an opportunity to thank somebody in the open source world, or thank a tool or a project that has helped you along the journey, mainly because we don't say thank you enough. It feels like a nice thing to do, and it sounds like you have, at least in the years that you've been doing tech, come across a fair range of open source tools. It doesn't have to be anything big, but something that's made a notable contribution that others may find useful. Is there something you can think of you'd like to thank?
So specifically in the CodeBuddies chat, there is a member named Angelo, and he's always been super, super helpful. So while I was learning to code, I would post my projects in the channel called Personal Projects, and he had the exact right mix of being like, wow, this is really cool, even though it's the dumbest app ever, like a tiny little app. He'd say something very supportive, but then he'd also recommend improvements every single time. And I don't think I would have ever been challenged in that way if not for him. Like just making it work isn't good enough. You have to make it clean, you have to make it usable, you have to make it good. And without him there for the past 6 months, I think it would have taken me a lot longer to get to this point. So thank you to Angelo for always being challenging.
Thank you, Angelo. I'm going to give one as well, just because I'm going to put it out there. It's Go specific, and Go is the language that I'm currently learning, but I don't think the Go aspect of this is particularly relevant. The person that's made a huge sort of difference to me would be Francesc Campoy. He used to be a developer relations advocate at Google for Go. He's now moved on, but he runs a YouTube channel called Just for Funk, where he produces fairly regularly, it might be once every couple of weeks, maybe once a month, a video where he describes exactly what you've just talked about in your learning journey. He takes you from scratch, that blank editor, all the way through to completion of a fairly major project. And he seems to do it in lightning fast time, not because he rushes or skips over anything, but because it's beautifully simple how he approaches things, and it's well articulated. Great guy, great all-round member of the community. So If you haven't seen Just for Funk, I strongly recommend it, even if you are not interested in Go at all. It's a style that I think is worth emulating. So I think that brings us to around about, I think, just over the half hour mark. I think we've run over a little bit. But it's been really good to hear your journey from marketing without that formal education all the way through to sort of developing your own learning style, your own curriculum, pulling the pieces together and landing that first job. I guess one final question. If others are out there sort of facing similar challenges, finding it difficult to land that first job in tech, finding it difficult to learn, to find that learning path that actually works for them, are you open to questions? Are you open to people reaching out and getting hold of you? And if so, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is rmorabia.com. I don't do social media, but you can email me at hi@rmorabia.com or just join CodeBuddies because I'm always there.
The CodeBuddies Slack is where it's at. Yeah. Okay. We'll put links to all of those so people can find you. So Radhika, thank you very much. It's been a fascinating journey.